Tonovi koji svi poznajemo i večeras ćemo govoriti o muzici, da se odmaknemo malo od onih teških tema. 14 albums with Thunder, songwriter, lead guitar, Luke Morley, joining us from London, from Brighton, England. Luke, welcome to N1. Thank you for joining.
It's a pleasure. Lovely to be here.
First of all, let's go back to the 14 albums with Thunder, and especially the relationship between you and Danny. You two grew up together, and that's how it started, and here we are. 2023, we're talking to each other. Tell me about that.
Okay, yes. Well, Danny and I, we met when we were 11 years old, which by my terrible mathematics, I think is nearly 52 years ago, which is a very scary number. And, you know, we started our first band at school, like, you know, a lot of kids do, and then we branched out from there and started playing in pubs, and then eventually we met a manager. It's a well-trodden path for many aspiring musicians, I guess. And I guess we are kind of slightly exceptional in that we've managed throughout all the kind of highs and lows that the music industry throws at you, we've managed to maintain a really good relationship, and we're still very, very close friends. And you know, some things are more important than rock and roll, and that is kind of more important, I think. You know, for your sanity and your peace of mind, you've got to really, really like the people you're working with, especially for a period of time that long, you know.
Absolutely, you have to love the people you work with, and you know, we miss those tunes. Do you miss working with Danny, working on new things for Thunder? Is that going to happen again?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, you know, Danny had a very unpleasant injury last year, a brain injury that required sort of surgery. It's a very unpleasant thing, and so we've basically, while he's recovering from that, Thunder's kind of in a holding pattern, I guess you'd put it that way. And he's getting much, much better. He's 100% there mentally. He's just got to go through all the physical rehab and those kind of things and deal with those issues. But we're not rushing him. You know, we've just said to him, listen, friend, you know, listen, mate, as soon as you're ready, you let us know, and then we'll go back to work. So I'm sure it'll happen. It's just a question of him being ready to do that, and physically and mentally, and feeling like he's kind of, you know, ready to get back on the stage. But in the meantime, of course, being a musician and having already been through the pandemic, which was, you know, 2.5 very uncertain years, obviously, to keep myself sane, I write songs all the time. So in that period of time, I wrote a Thunder album, and then I had these other songs laying around, so I started working on them, and that turned into my solo album.
How different is it from writing for the band and writing for yourself, topics-wise? How different is it, and where do you find a distinctive difference between, hey, I'm doing this for the band, this is how I see everybody as a collective, and this is how I see myself as somebody who is an individual?
Sure. I think, well, Thunder, I mean, is, you know, still evolving after 32 years, which is crazy. But Thunder is a rock band. When the five of us get in the room and plug in, the noise we make is what Thunder is. It's kind of unavoidable. All of us as individuals and musicians, that chemistry between us is unique, as it is in any band, and that's kind of what we do. So it's, you know, it's evolved on its own. So it seems kind of wrong to kind of mess with that in any particular way. I mean, Danny is a fantastic singer with a pure tenor voice. You know, I mean, had he been born a couple of 100 years ago, he'd have probably been a great opera singer or you know, on the stage in some variety, because he's a very, very great rock and roll voice. So obviously I'm writing for that voice with Thunder. With my own material, I'm much more in the, I suppose, baritone range. So I can't sing as high. I'm much more comfortable in a lower range. So obviously, if I'm writing with my own voice, I'll write in that kind of area, so I can, you know, deliver it convincingly. That's the main thing. I mean, Thunder's lyrics, they've kind of evolved as well over the years. I suppose a lot of the last two albums, Thunder albums, were concerned with the world as it is now, you know, socio-political stuff. I mean, it sounds really heavy, it isn't. It's still rock and roll, but I think one of the nice things about being a songwriter is if you have a point of view on something, then you know, you have the platform to express it. And a few things kind of really got up my nose in recent years, like Brexit. I'm not a fan. And, you know, and some of the people who are in charge of this country have really not helped it. And it's sort of started to isolate us from the rest of the world a little bit. And I feel very strongly against that. So that's kind of inspired quite a lot of songs. As also has the you know, the growth in social media is also worries me slightly. I'm not quite sure it worries me, but I think you know, there's lots of negative aspects to it for younger people. There's so much pressure on younger people now because everybody's got a phone in their camera in their pocket with their phone. So young people now can't make mistakes like my generation could, and I'm not sure if that's a good thing.
I would agree with you. I'm very happy that I lived in an era where there were no cell phones and no internet. Honestly, I would be here now. Two interesting points that you just made, and that is Brexit. How did it affect bands across the UK when it comes to touring, when it comes to collaborations, and when it comes to social media? But we'll go to that. How did that affect? I love that you have that political aspect in your work, because it's important. People can relate to it. People have certain opinions. You know, we can't just ignore things that are happening around us. So how does that influence one after everything that has happened after Brexit?
Well, I think artists, whether you make music or you make film or you make TV shows, whatever you do, I think we're, you know, the general public buy what we do, and thankfully that keeps us in a living. And I think we owe it to them to be honest with them. And if I feel something, I'm not going to kind of brush it under the table and pretend it doesn't happen. Similarly, I'm in my early 60s. You know, songs that I wrote 32 years ago were written by a man in his 20s. You know, so and I'm not the same man. And thank God, you know, I've grown up, and you know, different things kind of interest me. It'd be ridiculous for me to write songs now about chasing girls in a fast car. You know, I mean, it's not. You know, I don't do that. So what? I don't know anything about it, so I'm not going to write songs about it. So, you know, and things that make you feel something deeply are the best kind of things, I think, to express when you write material, when you write songs, because that way you will do a convincing job of being able to kind of perform the songs, get on stage and play the songs and what have you, because you believe it. And you have to believe it. If you don't believe it, I think people have an instinct when something is kind of false, and I think I can sense it. And we've always been very straightforward as people. We've always been very available, I think, to our fans. We've always kind of interacted with them as much as possible. When we started doing after shows before after shows existed, I think. Yeah, it's something that we don't want. We're not, as people, we're not starry. We're very normal, down-to-earth guys. So it's very important for us to keep that keep that message coming across. So we have to deal with things as we feel them, and some of the time that might not be what everybody wants to hear. Maybe some people don't want to hear songs that have a political aspect or a social aspect, but unfortunately I have to do it, otherwise I would go insane, and nobody wants that, obviously.
How weird is it for me to have Luke Morley on the other side saying, you know, we're just down to earth. You freaking superstars. I mean, come on. But I love it. I love it. I think being down to earth and really believing what you do, because you can't fool your audience. It's the same with journalists. You can't fool it. You have to believe what you are saying. So I really love that aspect. How is it for the young bands then? Do you support the young bands that are coming and they are struggling? I realize that they are really, really going through tough time, especially now.
Yeah, well, the music infrastructure has completely changed now. The music business is completely, it's the Wild West now. Things kind of had settled into a pattern when we came along where, you know, you started a band, you auditioned for people, you did a few gigs, learned the craft, and then if you were fortunate, a record company would invest some money in you, sign you to a contract, which is quite often long-term, three, 4 albums maybe. And in that period, they would invest heavily in your touring machine and try and do everything they can to kind of, you know, get your profile as widely sort of saturated as possible. That situation just doesn't exist anymore. Labels now, well, they don't really have A&R departments. They don't have people out scouting for talent. They wait for bands to kind of have a massive following on social media, and then they might have a look at them. And if they do sign to a contract, it's only incredibly short, 1 or 2 singles. So there's no kind of security in for the band. So as a result, you have lots of bands doing it independently. And of course, social media facilitates that. The only problem with that is that now everybody can make records very easily. When we came through, you had to have the investment from a label or somebody to be able to afford to hire the studio at £2,000 a day and go in there for a month and make your record and market it. These days, you can make a record literally in your bedroom, and you can go online and you can start a website and you can start distributing it via social media and try and build it that way. But the only problem with that is there's so much traffic. There's so many people doing that. For a young band now, the biggest problem is not being able to make a record. The biggest problem is to be able to shine a light over what it is you're doing, to attract attention to yourself. And that's, oh God, well, I'm just glad I'm not that age trying to do it now, because I think it's very difficult.
All right, I want to talk about songs from the Blue Room and the track Killed by Cobain. We're going to first hear it, and then we're going to discuss it. All right, so let's hear it.
No problem. Okay.
Killed by Cobain in America, blown out of the water. Moments too late for the gravy train. Turn back at the border, but it's gonna be alright. I thought I was made, but not quite. Years have passed, so don't even ask, 'cause it really doesn't matter no more. I was running away when I hit the shore.
This is definitely going to be my favorite one, Killed by Cobain in America. I really need to know the backstory of this song.
Okay. Well, in 1991, we were in an interesting position where our career had got off to a very good start in the UK. The album had gone gold. The same in Europe, the same in Japan even. And then we were all set to kind of go and take on America. And our label released the album. The video was all over MTV. The album charted. The album charted on the strength of that. Single made it to sort of just outside the top 50. We sold 250,000 albums, and we thought, this is great. We're going to crack America. All we've got to do there is go there and tour. And then, unfortunately, the tour we were booked on in America, which was opening for 2 big American acts, David Lee Roth and Cinderella, was cancelled. And we were somewhat mystified by this. Our American manager called us and he said, okay, guys, unpack, don't come. The tour's off. It's not selling any tickets. So we were like, well, why isn't it selling tickets with these artists on it? And he said, well, there's this thing called grunge. And he said, well, what's grunge? I thought it sounded like a weird social disease. But apparently, there's this new music movement out of Seattle. And he started telling us the names of these bands like Nirvana and Soundgarden. So, okay. Right. So why is that a problem? He said, well, nearly all the major radio stations in the States that play rock have changed their format to accommodate this new kind of music. And more traditional rock, bands like yourselves, Guns N' Roses, Aerosmith, they're kind of now seen as being a bit past it. We're like, well, we've only just started. How can we be past it? So that kind of really kind of made it very difficult for us in the States. And I guess what we could have done was we could have kind of gone there ourselves without the support of our label, but that makes it very difficult because, as you know, USA is a massive country.
Yeah.
And because we were doing very, very well everywhere else, we just thought, we'll just go where the love is, and maybe we'll come back to America later. But we never actually got round to that, so we've never really toured America properly. Yeah, but so anyway, grunge. Obviously, Kurt Cobain is the metaphor for the grunge movement killing us, if you like. But hey, that's the music industry. It's an interesting thing. Right? No. Well, it's an interesting thing about the music industry. I mean, I get asked a lot. People say, "Oh, my son's a musician and he really wants to have a career. What advice would you give him?" And I always say the same thing, which is, well, look, just make sure to prepare yourself for colossal disappointment. You have to have a little bit, hide like a rhino in the music industry, and I guess it's the same in any kind of artistic pursuit. I know, certainly. My wife works in the film industry, and some of the things that go on there are pretty horrendous as well. But things happen. You can't. Sometimes your timing is fantastically good, and sometimes it's bad. And our timing was very good. In the rest of the world, it was just stank in the USA. But what can you do?
All right, you took on production duties completely, and you played the majority of the instruments on songs from the Blue Room.
Yeah.
You did that?
Yeah, well, I did it because I didn't really have a lot of choice, because like I said earlier, I'm fortunate enough to have a small studio in my house, and that enabled me to do most of it here. I wasn't under any time pressure particularly, because I didn't know when it was going to be released. I just thought, well, I'll keep working on it in between doing Thunder things and other things. And when I got to the point where it needed like drums and a few other little bits and pieces, I thought, well, I can't do that in the home studio. I'm going to have to go into a proper studio just to finish off, just to do the drums and to mix. And by that point, I'd recorded most of it. The guitars, the bass, the drums, piano, harmonica, whatever, all the vocals, backing vocals, and I'd build it up over a year or so. And originally I thought, well, I'll replace those and I'll do this when I go into the studio. But after a while, I just thought, well, you know what, it sounds okay. I'm just going to leave it as it is, and that way it's a much more kind of, I suppose, like a collection. Yeah, it's a collection of intimate kind of bits of music that I've written, and I wanted it to be a little bit more like a collection of demos rather than a big, shiny, polished kind of album. I wanted it to be a bit more kind of, as you say, intimate, and so I ended up leaving it, and that made it very convenient, so I didn't have to pay anybody.
It comes out this month, if I'm not mistaken, right, on the 23rd?
That's correct, yeah.
All right. We're not going to keep this under embargo. I'm just warning you. What influences you? I know you said, over the years, I grow, I change. There are different topics that I'm interested in. Of course, I'm not going to write about chasing girls anymore, because that would be weird. But what influences you the most? When do you feel, okay, I'm getting it. I have to write this down. I have to record this.
Well, I have a kind of it's mainly my phone, actually. My phone is my little notation device. If I ever lost my phone, I'd be, quite distressed. Because I have I use voice recorder on my phone to record most of my ideas, whether it's I'll just get an idea, pick up the guitar or go to the piano, and I'll make a very brief kind of recording of a melody or whatever. And I also have a page of notes where I'll write down interesting phrases or things that I think might lead to an interesting lyrical idea, whether it be a quote from a newspaper or something somebody said in a film, or just something you hear in the pub, or it could be anything. It's a neat phrase with a kind of musicality to it. I'll write it down and then see where that takes me. And then when I actually get into writing mode, it's a very full-on thing. So I'll kind of develop a piece of music, and as it's developing, I'll think, well, where is this? How is this feeling? What was this suggesting lyrically? And then I'll go through my lyrical ideas until I find something that kind of goes, well, maybe that might work. And then you look at the meter and you go from there, really. And you just try and amass as many ideas musically and lyrically as you can. And then for me, I just try and kind of match them up and see what works together, I guess.
Yeah, as we in Bosnia, we call it talent. Just pure talent.
No, yes, some people call it that. I think it's a little bit of that, but it's a lot of hard work. It's a great McCartney, who knows obviously a thing or two about writing songs. And somebody asked him, and he said, well, I'd say it's 10% inspiration and 90% perspiration. Yeah. And I think that's a very good analogy.
It is. It is. You played all over the world. What is your favorite venue you've been in?
Oh, wow, that's a tough question.
People always want to know
so many.
that.
I mean, I think,
and how come you've never been in the Balkans?
That's a very good question. I don't know about that.
Because it was war.
We have to ask. Well, yeah, we'd have to ask my agent about that. I think obviously we're a UK band, so when I was a young man and a kid growing up, I used to go a lot to Hammersmith Apollo, or Hammersmith Odeon, as it was when I was a young lad, to watch bands. So the first time we played there, that was very, very special. Oh, crikey. There's venues all over the world that, I mean, you know, that we really like. I love playing, not a specific venue. I always love it when we go to Japan. That's great fun. I love playing in Germany. I like playing everywhere, really. I mean, I think it's not so much the venue, it's the audience. I know that's a kind of cheesy thing to say, but it's absolutely right, because without a good audience, you don't have a gig. And what makes great, I think, good live bands, is their ability to be able to interact with and excite the audience and kind of acknowledge the audience. Some bands don't. Some bands just get on stage and play it as though they were playing in a rehearsal room with no audience. But I don't think you can do that. You have to acknowledge the audience, involve the audience. And you see some acts that are really good at it. Bruce Springsteen springs to mind, because he's amazing live. He's amazing. It's an incredible show. Yeah, with Iron Maiden, that's right, yeah. And I think, you know, it's important to do that.
Yes, he was just recently here in Sarajevo, and there's an entire story behind him in Sarajevo. He played here in 1994, and then 20, 30 years later, he plays again in Sarajevo. And the way he connected with the audience, that was very emotional, because there's so much history behind. What is next? What is next for you? Will you take Songs from the Blue Room out on a tour? How do you plan on going further this year, next year with it? Will we have the opportunity to see you live?
Okay, right. That's a good question. I'm talking to people about that in a minute. I very much hope so. It seems like it'd be like a waste of time to make an album and then not go out and play some shows, obviously, because I'm a musician and that's what I do. So having said that, I want to make sure I can do it properly. So I want to make sure I have the right musicians and and it's the right kind of venues and it's the right time. The kind of dilemma is that, obviously, while we're waiting for Danny to get better, I can't really put a time frame on that. So I don't want to commit myself too far into the future with the solo thing, because Thunder is still very much my priority. So I'm kind of a certain amount of, not quite 100% sure, but what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and put together some shows for the end of the year, perhaps, if I can make everything else work in the right way. And then we'll see where we are with Thunder, and then I'll be able to plan onwards from that. So it's kind of slightly in a holding pattern right now, but hopefully it'll all work out, and I'll be able to do the solo thing, and Thunder will be back on the road as well. Luke,
thank you so much for speaking to us. I can't wait to hear the entire album, and I can't wait to see you live. And really, thank you for your time.
You're very, very welcome. It's lovely to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Luke Morley and Songs from the Blue Room. We'll be right back. U nastavku razgovaramo na koji način su danas umjetnici zastupljeni, a iz Londona nam se pridružuje upravo žena koja vodi neke od starih i neke od novih bendova koji su u usponu, a koje smo imali priliku vidjeti i u našem programu. Whitney Ribbons, Wild One Media Limited, joining me from London. Whitney, welcome to N1. Thank you for joining.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. There are so many great people that you represent. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about Blue Nation, Glen Matlock. I want to talk about Luke Morley. I've just spoken to him. So talk to me about Wild One Media and how you do it.
So to start off with, so my company is actually very new, but I have been what we call a radio plugger for, it would be about 4 years now. So I started in the industry in the live side of things. So I was a merch girl, and I was a roadie, and I would help tour manage bands on the road. About 8 months before the pandemic.
Yeah.
and the lockdown, I got a call from someone I'd met a few years before saying, do you fancy becoming a radio plugger? And I just thought, yeah, why not? It'd be nice to go, actually, first off, onto a regular wage, again, after being, you know, reliant on tours and things. And then, like I said, sort of 8 months in, lockdown happened. So I put my head down and I got into it in every possible way. And it was hard because the life of a PR and plugger person is very people facing. You know, you want to chat to people, you want to have proper conversations. And we were told, no, everything's becoming by email or a phone call now. And no one really knew what was happening for the first few weeks of everything with radio. But actually, we were quite lucky. We managed to keep going. And I can't believe I didn't really do this sooner, really. So now the lockdown's done and everything's sort of back to normal, or as much as possible, really. I decided it was time that I started my own company doing what I do. And Wild One Media was born about 6 weeks ago.
Tell me, how is it working with these big names and some of the names in the making? How is it? How is it in the industry now at the moment?
Well, I know I'm slightly biased, but I honestly feel like I'm so lucky with my clients. All of them, you know, regardless of size of artist, they've all been incredible. You know, they all knew I was starting up a new company and that things were going to be not maybe quite as smooth as everyone's used to, but they were very supportive and they've been very patient when I've needed them to be, and they understand that they have employed a one-woman show, effectively, and it's just me. Though I have to say, this week I've just taken on a little assistant, and he is amazing, and I love him.
6 weeks like, into the company, and you have an assistant.
Where's the people in my life? Yeah.
So how is it? How you know, Luke Morley, I just spoke to him. There's such a big name in the industry, and he's so down to earth. You know, it's almost unbelievable how down to earth he is. And you know, some people that are so down to earth, they don't even realize, you know, how big are they and how we see them from the outside. And you represented him. It's amazing. Glen Matlock, that we will have a chance to talk to as well. You know, I'm a big fan. I mean, come on. I mean, what are your principles of representing these names?
So, I mean, for me, I have to, first of all, I have to love, you know, things about you as an artist. I have to love what it is you're representing, what it is you stand for. And above anything else, especially with radio, I have to really love the music. I do have a sales background, and I found it very hard when I was sort of, you know, being instructed to sell something I either didn't really believe in. And to be fair, most of my sales training came outside of the music industry. But when you're then backing something that you truly love and believe in, and you know, I always wanted to be in bands. I realised very quickly that I was not going to be in a band. So I was like, no one wants to hear me sing. So I made the decision that I could still surround myself with the things that I love, which was travel and music more than anything. And I made a career path in it somehow, one way or another. So the fact that I get to work on music that I absolutely love and I listen to, and it's things that I put on my playlist, is wonderful. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a fan of Thunder and Glen and the Sex Pistols and some of the other artists I've worked with. There is a little, like, 12-year-old in my head still going...
Starstruck, yeah.
You know, having a little bit of a fangirl moment.
Yeah, yeah.
I've been very lucky that everyone I've worked with actually have been incredible. They've all been very hardworking, and they're genuine people at the end of the day. And you know, they are just people. Yeah. But they're amazingly talented people at the end of the day, and it's a pleasure to work with them all.
And especially after the pandemic, we had to relearn how to be kind to each other again. I had a feeling, you know. Did you feel that too?
Yeah, and also, I mean, look, there's been a million things happen during the lockdown. Some are good, some have obviously not been so good, but there are some silver linings things. And I do feel like we're a little bit more of mental health in each other's sort of individual situations, and being a little bit more patient with people and understanding that things take time to get back to normal. And the pandemic affected lots of people in a lot of different ways.
We are just blessed, we who are here. You and I talking to each other, texting and sending clips, funny clips. Isn't that just a blessing? You know, after everything that we have been through. Yeah, I would like to look at it like that. Whitney, you work with Luke and Neil of Blue Nation, a band that is, as their producer, Trevor Gibson, our common friend, says, a band that will be skyrocketing soon. They already are. As we speak, they are filming a video for every single time. And how is it to work with them? There's such fresh body of old music, and they are special in their own way. How is it to work with them, and you know, how do you see them going forward?
They are such a treat to work with. I was introduced to them because of Trev, actually. So I met Trev randomly in Paris on an Iron Maiden trip, and when I set up my own business, the first thing he did was send me a link to these guys and said, "You've got to check them out. Oh, and FYI, they've got a spare ticket for the UK Blues Awards like tomorrow night. Do you want to go?" And I was like, "Of course I do." And I, you know, the minute I walked in and shook their hands, I thought, "Oh, here we go. These guys are something else." And they're just so much fun to be around, first and foremost. Like, I genuinely love spending time with them. And then you hear their music, and I was totally blown away by them. And they are inspired by all of my favorite bands. So there's, you know, again, although I'm biased, you know, I do think they are absolutely incredible. And I'm so excited to see hopefully what I do with them continuously. And where they go in the not too distant future. What are the biggest challenges in the industry now? Obviously, we have social media now. It's different to communicate, like you said in the beginning of our conversation. But what are the biggest challenges? What are the challenges for you when it comes to this industry, this music industry, and especially UK? So, from my point, the hardest thing has been, and yes, don't get me wrong, social media and Spotify and all of the digital age, there are a million incredible things about all of them. You know, these like free avenues for artists or consumers to absorb music in some way and reach, you know, people all over the other side of the world with your songs or whatever. That is insane. Like that. You know, you think back to when you were a kid and, you know, you had to queue up outside a shop to get that CD or tape or vinyl or whatever it was. And now everything is accessible in the click of a button. And you can get your music out, especially as independent musicians. They can get their music out to millions of people so easily. From my side, the fact that now everyone can, you know, just talking straight up from a business point, if nothing else, the fact that everyone and their grandmother essentially can pitch their own music, produce their own music, run their own label or whatever, it has made it harder for anyone that has sort of crafted their art essentially in whatever PR, producing, photography, filmmaking realm. It's a lot harder to get, you know, your portfolio actually seen by, you know, if you're trying to like sort of progress your career effectively, and if you're trying to like push yourselves out there. And same with bands, they are now competing with more and more and more artists every single day. The amount of singles that get released and we're not just talking through labels, like I said, independently, on Spotify, however, we're talking something like 60,000 singles get released every single day or something stupid. So the competition for everyone has gone up. And yes, the avenues to get yourself out there have too, but the two don't necessarily always align.
Whitney, thank you. Thank you for being our guest on the show.
Lovely to speak to you. Lots of love.
Glen Matlock with us tonight. Glen, welcome to N1. Thank you for joining.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I'm a little bit blurry today. I was gigging last night and I drove home for the night, so I'm still getting it together.
You fit in right in the Balkans where we're all blurry all the time, so you fit in just perfectly. All right, Glen, first of all, the first question that has been looming in the Balkans when it comes to Sex Pistols and you is how much do you have to love the Beatles not to be part of Sex Pistols again? That is a question that's always been out there. Never had the answer to it.
I don't know. That was a load of old nonsense story that was put around by Malcolm McLaren. But I will say we have reformed several times since, 1996. We did a big world tour a couple of times since then. And I know the band could have asked any other bass player in the world to do it, and they asked me. So I had seen Steve Jones for a long while when we did that. And I said, what you been doing? He said, I've been working on some songs. And I said, what have you done? He said, I did a cover of Love Me Do or something like that. So,
when it comes to the music, when it comes to the time span of your music with Sex Pistols and not being with Sex Pistols, there's always been some anti-establishment messages. Well,
there was a lot going on back then that needed to be addressed in some shape or form, which John did mainly. It's far from an ideal world, and what's happened in Britain over the past 5-6 years with Brexit and the lurch to the right of this particular bunch of Tory, I don't know, tosspots I call them, to be honest, and toe rags are very self-interested. I think you have to speak out against them, and there's not a lot I can do individually, but I think if collectively loads of people speak about things, it kind of possibly slowly changes things, a bit like gnats biting at somebody's ankles. One gnat you can deal with, 2 or 3 you can deal with, but when there's hordes of them, people have to run away. And I think we're beginning to see what's happening. So I wrote an album that's not entirely to do with that, but has a lot to do with that. And maybe about half the songs on the album are my take on this kind of crazy wrong path that Britain's taken, I think. And I think people have been hoodwinked by people whose sole purpose in life is to hoodwink people, and I think we should collectively wise up a little bit more. So that's what it's about.
Yeah, I love that you have you keep having the political views. It's important because people cannot ignore what's been going on, and also you as a role model, people will listen to you. You have every right.
Am I really a role model? I don't know about that.
Been for so many years. Are you really?
Well, I have been maybe a little bit, but I think if you've got a bit of a platform, which I have, I get my songs played on the radio and you're talking to me on the TV and stuff. I think it's an abrogation of responsibility to not kind of think a bit clearly and give a voice to these things that lots of people are talking about. I don't think I'm the guy who's invented the anti-Brexit and anti-right-wing lurch. But we've had, I haven't invented that, but I picked up on what people are thinking, and I'm using my way of songwriting and personality and putting things across to just get people to open their ears and eyes a little bit more so they don't be taken for monks.
That is so important. I'm glad we're talking about this, but we'll go to the music in a second. But I love that you're so openly talking about this. Do you think things can get better? I mean, it has been going downhill for so many years. How does it affect bands, musicians today? Freedom of speech. How does that affect the common man today, and especially the artists such as yourself?
Well, how does it affect it? I think certain people will speak their mind anyway. A lot of people kind of like bogged down with the work they have to do, and they're just dog-tired at the end of the day and want to soak up some kind of not very taxing TV show, which is kind of, who said that religion is the opium of the masses? Well, Love Island is these days, really, and I think it stops people from talking. But I was beginning to think earlier this year that I'd written some of these songs a while back, and I had a struggle to get them out initially because of lockdown and loads of other reasons, but they're out, and I thought I'd missed my moment. But maybe about 6 weeks ago, I was in New York, and I got asked to do some press, and I'm going to go and kind of publicise my album Consequences Coming up in Midtown New York, the Rockefeller Plaza, where there's some radio stations and TV stuff. But I couldn't get a cab that morning because there were conniptions going on in New York, because coming down as I was going up from Fifth Avenue, there was a big motorcade and there was roadblocks because Donald Trump was going downtown to be arraigned in the big courthouse. So I'm going to promote my album Consequences Coming, and he's getting them. So I kind of took a small amount of childish pleasure in the timing of that.
God. So you were there then.
Yeah, you know, and also since then, you know, Boris Johnson's come totally unstuck. You know, he was going to be world king. Oh, that lasted 5 minutes.
It's like a domino
how sorry I feel for him.
No, it's okay.
Pardon?
It's like a domino effect. We've seen it a couple of years ago. They are going up. You know, Trump and Boris Johnson and everything that they have been doing. It's like copy paste situation, and then all of a sudden they're all going down, and you being part of that and seeing that. I think it gives you a little pleasure, at least a little bit.
Well, it certainly does, and. My dad used to say little fish are sweet. But there's also a fantastic song by Jimmy Cliff. And there was a movie that was set in Jamaica. Jimmy Cliff plays this kind of yardie gangster thing. But this movie's called, and the song's called The Harder They Come, The Harder They Fall.
Exactly.
Yes, that's what I like to see.
We have a similar thing in Bosnia. We say the higher you fly, the longer you and the heavier you fall. Your fall is going to be heavy. So I'm paraphrasing, of course, but it's similar. I want to talk about, before we go to the music again, I want to talk about the TV series. All right, so the version of the split with Sex Pistols, seen in the TV miniseries Pistol, you said it was untrue. You said that you refused a request from manager McLaren to rejoin soon after being fired. Can you tell me about that? What is the real truth behind it?
Well, in the miniseries, I mean, I don't know, maybe I was daft. I trusted Danny Boyle. I thought he was good. I thought he would give quite a sort of balanced, nuanced version of things, and he didn't. And it was the same old rubbish all the time, you know, the Beatles thing, me being sacked. I left the band. I got fed up with John. There was something about John that I see echoed in people like Donald Trump and Farage over here. So I couldn't quite put my finger on it back then, but I didn't like it. I didn't dig it. And I think maybe over the past 45 years, people have come around to my way of thinking, and then Danny Boyle's negated all of that. I'm not very happy with him, really. But it's kind of been and gone. He say it's all bollocks, you know, and it's just a kind of an entertainment thing, but it purports to be a documentary. And I think it's dishonest, really. So, but anyway, you know that. It did annoy me a year ago when it came out. I've moved on. I've been so busy, got my album out. I had a late night last night because I'm actually playing bass with Blondie, and we did the Isle of Wight Festival, and we did Coachella, and then we got Glastonbury coming up. I'm just really busy. I can't spend my time living in the past, you know.
How is being and touring with Blondie? I think that is, you must have so much fun Blondie.
Yeah, it's great. You know, they're a class act. I've been mates with Clem Burke, the drummer. We play well together, and Debbie's cool, and they got a great body of work, and they always push the envelope musically a little bit. And it's fun and a privilege to play, and I think I bring something to the table as well with my bass playing. It all works.
Who is your favorite bass player? I'm really just wondering.
There's a few, actually. Entwistle, James Jameson, probably he played on all the Tamla Motown stuff. I like Holger Kuske, he was in Cannes. I like Ronnie Lane. McCartney's not bad on some of his stuff. You know.
Are you allowed to say that?
There you go, there's the Beatles thing. I almost didn't say that, but I'm just being honest, you know. Yes, Carol Kay's good.
Yeah, it's so nice to be honest.
You can't come unstuck if you're honest.
Yeah, exactly. You know, when you're honest, when you say the truth, that truth will be true tomorrow too. You don't have to get confused about it. So, all right. So your new album, new solo album, also contains some opinions, like you said before, on politics, modern politics, and former bandmates who have, you never had shared stage with. Can you give us some more details on your new album and what can we? Well,
it's an album. It's got a baker's dozen, which is 13 toe-tapping songs. Maybe half of them are to do with my take on Brexit and the right-wing lurch we've unnecessarily seen in the UK and in other places around the world. And it's just my take on it. I mean, it's not like a po-faced, miserable, overly serious diatribe against the state of things, but there's an element, tongue-in-cheek kind of way, with my sort of sunshiny personality. And yeah, well, I'm pleased with the album. I've had nothing but good reviews on it. I've done TV over here. I spoke my piece on the BBC, and they didn't know what hit me.
Wait, was it live? Was it live?
It was live. Now, the only thing was, with these TV things, I thought I was doing it in London, and I only found out the day before it was in Manchester. So I had to get myself to Manchester, and then they told me I was going to be on at 8 o'clock in the morning. So I was up at 6 a.m. to get ready to get to the studio. And so I was annoyed with them. And they asked me a couple of wrong questions, and they picked on the wrong guy.
We'll talk about music, and I read something which I really loved. You said, I think good music is a skill of loads of influences. The trick is to make it seem new. Some of these younger punk bands do that a little bit. What did you mean by that?
Well, that's what I say, really. I mean, even if you go back to the Sex Pistols, we had so many. It sounds very simple, but Paul Cook liked Tamla Motown as I did, and liked Roxy music. Steve Jones loved the New York Dolls, and I liked them a little bit. We all collectively, the three of us, me, Steve, and Paul, loved the Faces, which is why I got the gig in the first place. Glenn hated all that. He liked Van der Graaf Generator and Pink Floyd and stuff like that. And so there's all these different influences, and you end up with a soup, and you think, oh, we got soup, but it's like a very rich soup.
There are a lot of new bands that are so influenced, and I have to mention this new band that you probably have heard of, Blue Nation, Neil and Luke, and now with Nick, and they have these 60s, 70s in their sound, and there is something familiar, but it's in a new body. And I think, is that what you mean when you say, it's a lot of different influences, but you make it sound new as well?
Maybe. I'm not that acquainted with Blue Nation, and I will check them out. Does she? Well, I better speak to her about it then. I've just been too busy. But the whole yardstick for songwriting for me is all that Tamla Motown stuff. People like Ray Davies and the early beat groups like the Kinks and the Yardbirds and the Stones and the early Who and the Small Faces. That's the building block of songwriting for me. Bob Dylan as well. Lots of music to me these days sounds like loads of little different bits stuck together. Now, it might sound all right, it doesn't necessarily make a good song. And there's an art to songwriting, which I think I've got actually. You know, then it's, I don't want to sound old-fashioned. I want to use that element of it, and then you jazz it up by getting cool people playing it on my album. You know, I've got Thomas who did the Kill Bill theme tune. He plays on a track. I've got El Slick, he played with Bowie. You've got Norman Watroy playing bass on it. Then Bert plays on a few tracks. You know, I take a simple song in, and then we jazz it up, and then it can go anywhere. Yeah. And it kind of does, and then you pick out the good bits. But there's, again, you're getting that rich soup of all those people I've mentioned, individual influences over the years. What do you like the most? Is it the writing? Is it the studio thing? Is it performing? Is it the touring? What is your favorite thing of it all? I think it's all part of it. I also do, as well as touring, you know, big stuff with Blondie and club shows with my band. I also do a lot of solo shows, just me and acoustic, like an evening with Glen Matlock. And what a big buzz for me is when you know, you're in an intimate venue and you can see somebody's, you know, in the whites of their eyes, they're picking up on something that you wrote maybe 40 years ago or 40 days ago that was just purely a figment of your imagination. When people pick up on that, that's a real buzz. You know, and you feel like a connection, and it's a two-way thing. And that's what drives me, really. Do you know what? I think one of the most important things in the world is travel. I think if people travelled more, they'd understand each other better. And I've been fortunate enough to be many places. You know, a few years back, I played on the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea. I went and did a show in Palestine with some people over there. And you soon realise people are the same everywhere. You know, they want to work, they want to put some food on the table, they want to look after their families, and they want to sort of let off steam without too much let or hindrance. And it's the same for anybody all around the world. Everybody's the same. Right. You know, but it's like when you don't get to see that, you think, oh, no, they're against us, you know.
No, you know, people, like you said, you know, when you travel, it enriches you so much, and you see that how similar, not different, how similar, how same needs you have as a human being, just like the next human being, and it makes you feel smaller, right? At least for me, when I travel, it makes me feel smaller, more humble, knowing all these cultures and nations and people. And I think, you know, you going through that and being in all these places.
66 and a half, and that's me. You know, but people like it and pick up on it.
Thank you for being with us.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
Gledali ste Specijal N1 televizije. Naši gosti su bili Glen Matlock, Morley i Whitney Ribbons, zastupnica ovih britanskih imena. Sve ove i ostale vijesti možete dalje potražiti na našim sajtovima kao i na našim društvenim mrežama. Ja sam Ika Ferrer-Gotić. Ostanite uz program N1 televizije.